Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time, episode 9 with Jerry Rees. We will get started in about 3 minutes. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us today for Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time Zoomcast with Jerry Rees. We will get started in about 2 minutes. Welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We're on episode 9 with Jerry Rees. Thank you for joining us. We will begin in about 2 minutes. Thank you guys for joining us today on Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time, episode 9 with Jerry Rees. We will begin in just a bit. All right. Oh, goodness. Welcome, everyone, to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Time travel is the ultimate experience. In fact, it's probably the most immersive and interactive attraction ever imagined. Here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio in Pasadena, California, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where experiential entertainment vets Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero study the past and spin the present envisioning the future of UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. And each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and accomplished colleague aboard our time machine. We journey through that person's career, unraveling the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you're welcome to type in any questions into the chat box, and our passenger will answer them, time permitting, of course. So climbing aboard our time machine today is writer, director, animator, and artist, Jerry Rees. If you've been to a Disney theme park anytime since 1987, you've surely enjoyed the attraction films, pre-show videos, and live shows written, designed, or directed by one of the most innovative, imaginative, and ideological people in our industry. It is now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director Joe Lancicero, along with the mind behind 22 beloved Disney theme park attractions, Jerry Rees.
Oh,
Hello.
hey.
Whoa. Oh, Ryan.
Oh, man.
Wow.
I liked your idea of going into the future, but I didn't know we'd encounter the Zeta virus. What?
Gee,
Maybe we ran out of variants. We're on Z. It's going to start.
I would be out of it by now.
Oh, man.
Wow.
I've survived all this time. I'm not going to let it get me.
How many years in the future was that?
That was 5 years in the future. People are still not getting vaccinated. What
Okay.
does it take, people? It's insane.
Wow.
Oh, Jerry. Hi.
Hi, Jerry Rees.
Howdy.
Hey, let me start by saying, believe it, I just did the math, Jerry. We've known each other for 47 years. Now, for you people in the audience, you're going, that's impossible. They're much too young to have known each other for 47 years. But we met back at Cal Arts in 1975. And Jerry, you have been an inspiration to me my entire career. You know, when all of us arrived at Cal Arts, each of us thought we were the best in the world because we all came from our own little ponds. And then we realized we were in this big sea of incredible talent, but the biggest talent without a doubt at Cal Arts and through my entire life in my professional career, I've always looked up to Jerry Rees.
Oh my gosh.
And we finally got to really work together towards the end of my career at Imagineering, and just like so many people, I always say I've always stood on the shoulders of giants, but Jerry, you are the biggest and most talented and just great human being too.
I so appreciate that.
No, Jerry, we both know, we all know in this industry, you find really talented people, but often they're not the nicest people in the world. But when you meet somebody that's, super as talented as you and such a fantastic human being, that's a real blessing. So I'm so happy to have you on the time machine today. Brian, let's get this thing cranked up and get the party
started.
I really appreciate that. Oh my gosh. Yes,
right,
we go
Jerry.
way back.
Jerry has a long and illustrious career, and he's barely halfway there. So to try to squeeze this into our hour, because time is always of the essence here, let's put this thing in gear. Let's go to around, I think it's 1959, and we're inside Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland in California.
Oh my gosh.
I think we're here with your parents. What's going on?
I just have a memory of being lifted up and looking through a little window and seeing the three fairies from Sleeping Beauty with their wands, and somehow there's pixie dust happening, and I'm too young to know how it's happening, but I feel like it's magic, and I want to relive that again. And it's such a potent image that I don't remember anything else about the trip to Disneyland when I was a tiny little kid, but that stuck with me. It's like magic can happen.
Yeah. So if we fast forward a few years in the future here, we're over at one of my favorite attractions, Adventure Through Inner Space. And it looks like there's an exhibit over here on animation. What's that?
Oh, yes. I encountered that when I came out. It startled me. I had seen the Disney films, but I hadn't connected yet that the handcrafting that you could reach in and do it yourself. And I saw stacks of drawings being flipped, and it showed, again, the fairies from Sleeping Beauty and also the penguins dancing from Mary Poppins. And they were being flipped physically by some little mechanism. And I saw animation papers falling and characters seeming to come alive. And it just mesmerized me. And I was suddenly hit with this idea that you could do it. And it was a series of drawings. I started doing a whole bunch of flip books. And my grandma got very upset because I was wasting paper. She said he would only draw one little thing on each page and then go through a whole pad. So I was doing surfers and all kinds of stuff. But a shark would come out of the wave and bite the surfer.
What was it about this that inspired you? Was it the characters, like something you drew, actually creating emotion in people?
It was, I felt such a connection with anytime I saw Disney content. The characters seemed to be alive and have their own thoughts and feelings. And I didn't really know how to even discuss that until later, and when I was being mentored later at Disney. But it was a powerful feeling of something being alive, and the fact that it would come out of your pencil onto the paper and then seem to have a life of its own with thoughts and feelings and make you feel emotions. There's nothing like that. It's a creation moment.
Wow. So if we move a little forward now, it's about 1966. I think you're about 10. And it looks like you're driving with your parents on an overpass, and there's a drive-in movie theater.
Oh my God, your machine. Oh my God, it's night. We're coming over an overpass, over freeway on a local street, and I see a screen to a drive-in theater, and it comes up into view as we get near the top of the hill, and it happens to be the Monstro sequence from Pinocchio. Ooh. And just amazing. And I plead with my dad to pull over to the side of the street, and he does, and he puts on his blinkers, and I roll down the window and watch on this big, huge screen. And we're up at the level of the screen because we're on the top of this overpass. And it's just so dynamic with Monstro the whale, and Pinocchio winds up drowned face down in the water at the end of the sequence. And I pleaded with my dad, please, let's go to it. So he did. The next showing that night, we drove into the drive-in theater, and I got to just look at the amazing Pinocchio and just realized the depth of the artistry and storytelling that was achievable. And it's just, I had been obsessed with fine art and portraiture at the time, and Rockwell and Sargent and everything that was capturing my attention too. But I realized that all the depth of artistry in any of those classic efforts was present in the best Disney features. So I was hooked.
And I think the other common thread in all those great artists and everything you've ever done is, the human experience. That is about, telling a story about the human experience and telling it in a way that captured people's emotions, whether it was a Rockwell painting or any of those great classic illustrators. And
you're right, there was usually a story. It's the guy coming home from being in the military and everybody in the apartment coming out to greet him, and you feel the emotion. Just every little thing was a story. You're right.
Wow. So now we're at Loma Linda. Are we at a university and you're working in the AV department? What is this?
I was too young. I actually snuck into the audiovisual department at the university in order to punch animation paper, because it was that if I had got Acme pegs, I had the Cartoon Color Company. I had ordered Acme pegs and one ream of the punched paper to start trying to do animation myself, but it was too expensive. So I went in there to use their industrial hole punch, and I was caught by the manager, and he scolded me, and he asked me why I wanted it. So I told him I was doing animation at home. He said, you can't do that, and told me all the equipment that I would need in order to do something like that. But I claimed to be doing it with a tripod setup and weights at home and a ribbon, so the family didn't walk into my hot set. So he wanted to see what I was up to. And I brought in a little projector and a cardboard, and I showed him some of my animation. Boy, did his tune change. Instead of "you can't do that," he went, "Did you do that? That's yours? You didn't trace that?" And it was the penguins from Mary Poppins. I was trying to do their little dance. So he turned from "you can't do that" to "here's a phone number." And he jotted down the phone number, and he said, "I hear that the veterans at Disney are getting retirement age and they're going to start mentoring people. So in case you want it, here's a phone number to their animation department." So I called, and I was just 16, just about to turn 17. And I got Ed Hansen, who was the production manager at the Disney feature animation department, on the line. "Hi, somebody gave me this phone number. Is this Disney?" And so he said, "Oh, sure, have your dad bring you down." So my dad drove me down to Disney. I still have my first pass that I used to get in when they wrote for me to get in the gate. And they just suddenly, I went from just dreaming of Disney and having no idea how to get there to being mentored by Eric Larson. They said, well, you're still in high school, but here's a desk. And anytime you come in, I met Eric and he said, yeah, you'll sit here. I'll give you some tips. So during my junior and senior years of high school, I was mentored by Eric Larson, who was one of Walt's 9 old men. Wow. And actually, Milt, Wooly, Frank, Eric, and Ollie were all working. So, wow, 5 of the 9 old men were still at their desk working when I was a kid mentoring there. And so they would call. My parents told me that later, when I grew up, they said, "Oh, Disney used to call and ask, is Jerry had a break from high school yet? Can he come in?" So they kept tabs on me, and Eric just taught me amazing stuff. And it went right to the heart of, it's not. I know that to you and to most beginners, the novelty of moving something is very exciting, but that's not enough. You have to move the audience. So it's like the novelty of motion it's like not exciting for the audience. It's exciting for you. Yeah. So learn, who is your character? How do they feel? What are their fears? What are their hopes? And so he guided me and all the rest of the people that he mentored into that space of the illusion of life. What makes it seem to have its own thoughts and feelings and its own eccentricities as a person, because we're all eccentric individuals, and people quickly get into generic spaces with animation, and he would coax us to get into the individual eccentricity of our character.
Okay.
So just for those people on the Zoomcast today are not familiar with animation history, the 9 old men were the animators that were handpicked by Walt. There were many animators at the studio, but they were the top guys. And Jerry and any of us who went through Cal Arts and were part of that group, we were so fortunate because we were getting handed down directly from the masters who worked directly with Walt. Neither Jerry or I never met Walt, you never met Walt, but we were fortunate enough that these guys and they created the art form. They were the ones that really figured out all these things that Jerry is talking about. They created the art form, which, everything that they handed down to us, I think, has been continually handed down through the next couple generations of animators now. So very, very fortunate for us to have been there at that time in history.
Yes, and just to tie a bow on that, one of the things they passed down was to keep exploring in the way they did and not just copy them. Exactly. Eric and Frank and Ollie, they were very adamant about that. And they said, it's flattering to see you studying my flipping scene from Snow White or Pinocchio or whatever, and it's good that you're learning, but I don't want you to just copy me. It's like, when we did it, we were looking at life. So they said, please, I know you're studying, looking at our stuff, but look around you, look at life, draw things in. So I started to do that. And then the Fox and the Hound did some innovation with the Little Bird Dinky, with some timing things that I got from looking at nature rather than looking at other animation. And 10 years later, Ted Berman, I got the article sent to me within the last 6 months by an NBC news producer. He said, I found this article. It mentions you. Ted Berman, 10 years after the Fox and the Hound, said, we had a way of animating birds from Snow White, Cinderella, all the way through. And then this guy, Jerry Rees, came along and figured out something new. And so I had no idea he had thought that or said that. So it was at Eric's prompting that I didn't look at other people's animation, but looked at real life and tried to bring something new in. So Eric encouraged that.
So let's, we got a little too far. Let's go back to 1975. You graduated high school and you're in the first animation class at a new animation school up in Valencia, which must have been like the boonies.
Right. Well, actually, all that stuff that I was just describing was previous to that. That was when I was still in high school. So as I'm graduating high school, they said, we're going to start this new thing called the Cal Arts Character Animation Program. You're graduating high school, perfect timing. How would you like to be teacher's assistant for year one? I said, yes, but we can't afford it. And they said, here's a scholarship. So I spent the summer prepping for it and then went out and met Joe and all the other people. We were the guinea pigs of the Disney Character Animation Program, the first few that went through. And after 2 years at Cal Arts, Disney drafted 4 of us away. So I was in the first group that was whisked out of college to be college dropouts, but full-time Disney feature animators.
So tell us who some of these people are. Wait, go back. We know.
Okay, so
we know the curly-haired guy on the left.
Joel and Cicero, striped shirt all the way to the left. I am looking all too coy just below him. Harry Sabin below that. Up to just to the right of Joel and Cicero is Daryl Van Sitters. Bruce Morris is right next to my head. John Lasseter is looming up at the top with the pencil in his mouth, about to strangle someone. We'll have Leslie Margolin next to him, and then Mike Cedino is looking over the shoulder of our teacher, who's has his hands folded there. Elmer Plummer was our life drawing teacher, and Paul Nowak not looking at the camera. Nancy Beeman smiling there above Brad Bird, who's got his mustache, and Doug Leffler is laying on next to him, and then John Musker seated on the floor, and all the way to the left, Harry Sabin took this photograph and gave a number of us a nice glossy print. I kept mine and scanned it at high res. So I think the only high res version of this photograph out there is the one that I scanned and pushed out onto the web.
Wow, very cool.
There's a lot of hair in that picture.
There is.
So we know that you just said you got to go work at Disney halfway through college, and you got to work on, it looks like, Pete's Dragon, one of my movies I got to see as a kid. And then you worked on what you got to work on, was it The Rescuers?
That's this Pete's Dragon, the small one, and the Fox and the Hound. And by the way, I would just say that CalArts class, just to put a pin in that, was class A113. Yeah. And I started putting that messages in my films, A113, and other people that I knew did as well. And eventually Annie Leibovitz shot a picture of all of us in room A113 for Vanity Fair. So eventually that became a place.
Yeah. So 1987, you get an opportunity after your years at Disney to direct your first full-length animated film. Tell us about that.
Wait, can I just back up the machine?
Yes.
Just
sure, if you want.
I'm not driving.
Just because I think 1982 and Tron was kind of seminal, and I don't want to miss that moment.
Right. So helped with the end of Pete's Dragon, small one, Fox and the Hound. We were between films then, and Tron came into the studio. I was the only person from the animation department that went up and knocked on their door and joined them. So it was fun to be, again, exploring, which is what the veterans encouraged us to do. So there were only two of us that did computer graphics choreography. Me and Bill Croyer planned every single CG shot that's in that film. And people at the time, a lot of people were going, well, that's push button art, it's the enemy. But I was insistent that it was our next paintbrush, that it was going to be our tool to tell stories. Lasseter came by and used to be very mesmerized watching what we're up to. And he mentioned to people later on that, as he got into computer graphics and Pixar, that one of the early inspirations was coming to visit Bill and I during Tron and seeing the potential of computer graphics to be driven by artists to do storytelling.
Wow.
And I just want to say, Jerry has always embraced technology and used it as an amazing tool. And just in the projects that we worked on, and I don't want to move ahead on the time machine, but a couple of things that we did. One of the things I was always impressed by Jerry is that he understands the technology and uses it in the service, not only of helping the people working on the project understand how their vision is going to be realized, but then using the technology to actually deliver the experience as well, but always in the service of the art.
Cool.
Right. Story, character, and emotion is key. And in the theme parks where you're pushing to be as innovative as possible, still innovation is happening so quickly in the world that in the several years it takes you to make the project for the theme parks, invariably innovation is chugging along and brand new things are happening that feels outdated very quickly. So the only reason it has staying power is if you have a reason to care about the adventure you go into. So, emotional engagement is always key.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
now Ryan, now push the button and let's do
Accelerate it.
87. There we go.
Okay.
So yes, it was actually 85. I started on that, and it was about a year and a half process. The Brave Little Toaster, I had left Disney and with Brad Bird, there were a number of us that were exploring finding sort of impediments at the studio and trying to innovate elsewhere, and really trying to carry on the Disney spirit somewhere else, because somehow middle management was not allowing innovation to continue at that moment at the studio. So Eric Larson and Frank and Ollie gave us their blessing to go out into the world and try to keep their flame alive as best we could. So tried to get something going, animated feature with Gary Kurtz. That would have been Will Eisner's The Spirit. That did not get traction after a couple of years, and he was going through bankruptcy. So as soon as I was free, Tom Wilhite called me and said, there's this novella. It's called The Brave Little Toaster. I know it sounds like a kiddie film, but it's whatever film you want it to be. It was originally thought about by Lasseter and the studio group here, but he's been fired. And now I have people telling me it would be a nice short, but not really a feature. Why do you think of that? And he said, but I really believe it could be in the right hands. So it needs to be developed, written, and directed. I have hardly any money to give you, but I can let you have creative freedom. I know you're starving to make films, and Spirit didn't happen, but this can happen for you. I'll really give you free reign. So we had only $2.25 million for the entire 90-minute feature. But
give
he
some
stayed true to his
context to
word.
that number. Give some context to that number, because I think we really appreciate what you guys did with that money.
Yes, well, at the time, our competition would have been Care Bears, which was about $8 million, $7-8 million for those films. Bluth, which was around 12 to 14 million, and Disney, which was in the mid 20 millions. So we were absolutely the cheapest thing out there. But people didn't perceive that. They would guess that we had about $7 or $8 million when they looked at the film. But we, everybody that worked on it, oh my God, what a collection we had. But all of us cared about the moment. We were in our 20s. Some of them were just fresh out of college, like I had been a couple years earlier. And we were dying to make something that mattered. And our producers said, a couple of them, Tom Wilhite was so supportive, but some of them were saying, it's, prep it and send something overseas and a movie will come back. And I went, I don't want a movie to come back. I want to make a movie. I want to make something we care about. So that's Ann Talnis, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning political cartoonist. She was on our team, and Kevin Lima, who directed the Goofy movie, and etc. So there were a ton of great people first starting out, and all of us became a family. I mean, we moved to Taiwan together for 6 entire months.
Oh.
And so prepped here for 6 months, lived in Taiwan together for 6 months, post for 6 months after that, so a 1.5 year process. But yeah, there was a lot of just lifelong bonding that happened during that project. And all of us really cared about it. And Deanna Oliver, who did the voice of the toaster, we're still in touch. And she really cared about the character and cared about the crew. And, John Lovitz and Phil Hartman and Tim Stack. And it was just a wonderful team to work with. And it was kind of unusual at the time. I know people are used to it now, but this was not happening. I raided the Groundlings Improv Theater to get my voice performers. And, at the time there were established voice performers in the industry, but I had a table reading, and was not happy with what I was hearing. I felt like the pages I had written were better than I was hearing back. And Joe Rampt said, well, I'm taking some classes at Groundlings, and maybe you could find some people there. So I went to some of their shows and wound up grabbing John Lovitz and Phil Hartman, Deanna Oliver, Tim Stack, all from the Groundlings. And then got to work with Thurl Ravenscroft, who was one of my heroes from all his Disney work. And he did the voice of Tony the Tiger. But, and man, Phil just did a bang up job. But Ravenscroft was great.
Awesome.
And just everybody was so looking beyond this as not just a gig and a job. And people felt like the moment was exploration, innovation. There were a lot of people saying, this can't really amount to anything. We were independent. And anyway, everybody wound up really caring about it and working really, really hard. And so all these years later, it's nice to know that even though I'm 6 months in the hole, where I was not paid for 6 months of the movie, because I gave my salary back to the crew to help us finish the film, and Brian McEntee did as well. So I'm still in the hole on the movie, and it didn't get a theatrical release because it was shoved on the Disney Channel earlier, purposely to have people think it was discovered there rather than independently. Smart chess move from Katzenberg. So we went through some real sort of heartache after we finished something that we loved so much. But it's so exciting now to have people that are in touch, that are in their, they care about it. And so after many years on the dark side of the moon, over the last 5 years or so, I've had so many people get in touch who are now young adults and care about the film and the characters. And I've never seen the 2 sequels, but I was only involved with the first one.
So before we move the time machine forward, just 2 things I want observations.
Right.
One about that price tag.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I kept with me. And actually, I remember back at the studio, and Jerry, I can't remember if it was above your desk or above Brad Bird's desk. You guys always had little quotes. I remember one that you had above your desk that said, "Why would anybody other than your mother want to look at this?" You know, which always reminded me, okay, who am I designing for? But the other quote that you had up, or Brad had, was "Creativity costs no more."
Right.
And
that was something that I so praised Brian McIntyre for, who was our brilliant art director on the film. And I recently talked to him about that, and he liked my description of him, because I said it, when we went to Taiwan and we were working at cheap prices overseas, he picked beautiful colors to be painted on the cells. It didn't cost more to have good taste. Yep. He brought wonderful taste to the table despite the tiny price tag. So it was the same amount of money, paint the same amount of paint on the cell. It's just a better color because Brian picked it. And we actually had Ken O'Connor come out of retirement to do color stylization for the whole film. So he did color thumbnails for our emotional flow. And everybody got that it was driven by emotions that people would tap into. So, yes, it's appliances and they're inanimate objects and stuff, but I had the director of the mission and the killing fields. He told me that I had done something that he didn't think was possible. I had made him cry over an animated appliance. So it was really about, the bonding between the characters and really the question of how far would you go, how big of a risk would you take for someone you love? And so, and yes, there was a little hello to my classmates, A113. That's the apartment they get to during the story is A113. But yes, and Joe, you were talking about the thing of who would want to watch it. Something that they pounded into our heads was, they said, first of all, we never made a kids film in our careers. We made films that might appeal to the kid and us as adults, but we just made films. And they said, we didn't do focus research to see what demographic we were reaching. We never did that. We just said, do we care about it ourselves? And they said, if you love it, you have proof somebody does. If you don't, and you're like, I don't know, it's a job, whatever, but I think somebody else might like it. You don't have proof anybody does. So they said, make sure you care about what you're doing.
So Jerry, let's move forward now to 87, 88. You've made, it looks like, a career transition. Joe and I have started at WDI. We both started, I believe, in 87. My first project while I was still in college was something called Disney MGM Studios. I was assisting Bob Weiss and then Tom Fitzgerald, and got to work with that whole team. And we have this animation pavilion or experience. And I heard about this amazing film that's being made with like Walter Cronkite and Robin Williams, who I'd never imagined together. Tell us what you're doing here.
Right. Well, it was a job that I didn't go and ask for. I was shoved into the director's chair, and it was under these circumstances. I just had gotten a call. It was after Toaster. I didn't know what was next. I was sort of licking the wounds of not getting in the theaters and stuff like that. I get a call. This outside group, Bob Rogers and Company, and Mark Kirkland, specifically line producer, on a film for the animation building at Disney MGM Studios, this new park. And they said, we've been at it for 9-10 months, and we feel like the wind's going out of the sails. And Mark said, I really like your sense of storytelling. Can you come in and just be with fresh eyes? Because we we're so close to it. We've even had Frank and Ollie come over and collaborate, but we're so close to it. Please just have us do the pitch and be the fresh eyes. That's all we need. So I said, oh, okay, happy to do it. So went over, saw 2 pitches they had. They had one that was a Siskel and Ebert piece, which were critics at the time talking about how many drawings per second and all that. They had a Carol Burnett and Donald Duck version of Touring a Studio. And I just told them, well, all due respect, as clever as they are, none of these tell the story about what makes Disney animation special as opposed to other places. You're just doing the bragging rights for any animation. So I got in my soapbox and was like, it's not about how you move the drawings, it's how the drawings move the audience, is how I summed it up and said every department is the story department. You don't pick a color just because it's pretty. Like, what does that color say about the character's emotional state right now, and props and costumes and everything. So we met the next morning and they said, well, we'd like to hear further thoughts in the morning. Met in the morning and I added to my list, if I were you, I would start over, tell that story and bring somebody in like Robin Williams, have him get pulled into the world of animation and prove to him how strong the emotions are affected by all these choices. And so Bob Rogers, bless his heart, and George Victor and Mark Kirkland that were there, they said, hold on just a second. And they called the studio, got, I think it was Peter Schneider on the phone, and they talked about unplugging what they had been working on, the 2 projects for months. And I heard screaming over the phone, and I heard they mentioned my name. I heard more screaming over the phone because Peter didn't know who the hell I was. And then they hung up and said, okay, you've got 3 or 4 weeks to present something to Peter. If it gets past him, then a couple more weeks for Katzenberg. And I said, what are you talking about? You just asked me to come by to give an opinion. And they said, oh no, you must direct this. So I suddenly was doing that, but I had one more hurdle, which was Katzenberg saying, Robin Williams does not belong anywhere near Disney animation. He's a crotch-grabbing adult comic with substance abuse problems. And yes, we can have him in a Touchstone movie, but not Disney animation. That's sacred. So my argument was, do you like Pinocchio? Do you think Jiminy Cricket is a nice character? Yes, in both cases. So I said, okay. Cliff Edwards did the voice of Jiminy Cricket. His stage name was Ukulele Ike. He worked blue. You could buy Dirty records at the same time you went to see Pinocchio in the theaters. And he died an alcoholic. He had substance abuse problems. So I said, Walt went through exactly this moment and he chose the person that had the most charm and energy for the role. And boy, do we remember that. We don't remember the other stuff. Yeah. So he relented and said, because it's experimental, because it's short, because it's in the park and sort of away from all the features and stuff, I'll let you do this experiment. But if it fails, at least we haven't put too much effort into it, but he should go nowhere near a feature. We did the film Back to Neverland with Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite. It was a joy working with both of them. I was a real hero to my parents because I got to introduce them to Walter Cronkite on the set. Wow. And I loved meeting him too. And just Robin, what a dream. I went and recorded voices with him and then on the set. And we really, there was so much bonding and he was such a sweet, sweet guy. And I got to introduce him to all the animators that were working on him and bringing him alive. And he really, he was so touched meeting them and seeing how skilled they were. And he came and took me aside and he went, oh, I was so flattened. There were such talented people. And
wow,
he did this. He was really moved and bothered to tell me so. And so anyway, it was just a dream working with him. And one of the key sequences, as he went step by step into becoming an animated character and having Walter explain to him how every department is the story department and all the emotions that would happen, and he begins to feel them happen to him. One of the sequences was, as soon as he becomes a drawing and he's animated, he asked the animator, Bruce Smith, it's like, hey, animator, what can we do with this? And he's like, you can do anything that he can draw. Hey, animator, let's have some fun. So he went into this metamorphosis sequence where I let him improvise. I let him improvise. He went on for like a half hour and I had to cut it down to 30 seconds. Much like this show, we have to be concise. But then I did metamorphosis animation. Actually, Franz Vischer did the actual metamorphosis scene, and he changes into everything he's talking about while he improvises. Like John Musker, Ron Clements see that, and they go, oh my God, he could be the genie. So it was based on our short film, and the metamorphosis scene in particular, that they cast him. So that was a big domino to push forward for Disney in general and for their film. And they put this permanent tip of the hat to us in Aladdin. So when the genie gets his freedom and he comes back from one of his time warps, he's wearing that outfit, which matched in my film what Robin wore in live action as he stepped out of the crowd. So that was a wonderful introduction into anime, into the theme parks.
Yeah.
And it was such a joy. What a shock to go from sort of finishing a feature, not having it at the theater, sort of licking your wounds and not even knowing what's next, to not going in search of a job and just going, it would be great if we did X. And they go, okay, you're hired, do X. And it was a dream come true. And everything about it was just exhilarating. And Katzenberg and Bob Weiss and all the different people looked at that and they went, oh, this was like a project in trouble. And you became the fix-it guy, and not just fiddling with it, but regroup, clean slate, go forward, same deadline, and accomplish that. So they started throwing other things at me. So by the time we had opening day at Disney MGM Studios, they had thrown 3 more projects at me. So I actually had 4 projects in opening day and was overlapping them. So I directed George Lucas in a piece, and I was editing up at the ranch and looking at dailies from LA for my team, and took my animators along with me on the ride. So as much as I could, I would jump them from project to project. And so yes, the editing story with George and Anthony Daniels flew in and got into that costume. It still fit, and he cared about what the character was going to say. He met me in I got news that Anthony Daniels wanted to meet at like 2 a.m. He had just flown in from England, and I met with him. And he's like, I was thinking, could the character say something a little more like this? And I'm like, yes, I just wrote approximately what you would say. You're the character. Absolutely. So he was happy, and we had a great time. So, and I got to do something with Goldie Hawn and Rick Moranis and Eisner's piece in the park, which Robert Zemeckis was going to do the piece with Michael Eisner. And he got busy with something, so they asked me to step in for Zemeckis and do that piece. So again, they let me do clean slate. What would I do instead?
The Michael watch was so funny. I remember
that's
seeing
hysterical
that.
moment. Yeah.
Yes, and Jeffrey asked me to take that out after I did the pitch directly to Eisner and Katzenberg, and he went, very funny, Jerry. No, that's out. So I'm walking with Eisner out of the office afterwards, and I said, what do you think? What do you think, Michael? And he went, it's pretty funny. And I went, I think it's good. And he went, okay, keep it in. So I got disagreement. Jeffrey said, take it out. Eisner said, keep it in. I kept it in, and I got away with it. So
then you worked on the Indiana Jones stunt spectacular a bit, but what, and then tell us a little bit about Cranium Command.
I did those together
on Cranium Command.
What's that?
1 minute on Cranium Command. What was the coolest thing about working on that?
Okay, Cranium Command. It was, the crazy thing was 8 screens, 2 audio animatronic figures, effects that would start in the movie and spill out over the audience's head into the like lighting and steam and all kinds of things. And so having that many, like a character in the room with you that's robotic speaking to the actor in the screen, coordinating all of that with the point of view. And by the way, having Pete Docter being a junior animator on the pre-show, which is where Inside Out was born. The conceit in the theater is you're riding in the head of a boy, you're looking out through his eyes, and the different body parts, right and left brain, and the body parts are arguing about how to deal with the stresses of getting through a day. So that idea was the core to what we were doing. And we had the press event, and I was so happy that at the time this made sense. They said it's like MTV meets Wonder Years. So the almost overload of like, oh my God, where do I look? Because there's 8 screens and 2 audio animatronics and all these effects, but they ultimately felt the heart. So I thought that was an apt description. And Marty Sklar, bless his heart, he and Katzenberg would sit in when I had this mocked up in LA. And in LA, I didn't have any of the animatronic figures. So they'd be listening and go like, Jeffrey would go, who's talking? Who's talking now? And I go, well, that's going to be Buzzy. He's an audio animatronic figure. And oh, who's talking now? Well, that's going to be the hypothalamus. He's another animatronic figure. And Marty just said, well, I'm glad you know how it's going to work, because I'm confused, but I know that you know how it's going to work. So I trust that it's going to work in the park. And so to get that sort of support from them, and thankfully they came to the opening and went, yep, it works. That's what we wanted. That's great. But
So
not
Jerry,
being able to see
you.
it, they trusted it.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's do 30 seconds now because time's running down.
Okay.
Give us an alien encounter, extraterrestrial.
Extraterrestrial alien encounter.
Once, not so great, and then you.
I came in first. It was a story of live teleportation from another planet. I came in first. They invited me to come in and direct the media. So I did that first. All the elements having to do with the live broadcast I directed. Then I, of course, wanted to follow it to the park and deal with all the aspects, but they said, no, thank you for the media. They went and did an install without me. And then Eisner and Marty Sklar and Tom Fitzgerald and various other people called me back and said, okay, what they opened is not good. We need you to go direct everything, not just the media, the whole show. So Rick Rothschild and he was my producer on it. I became director then of the whole event as it would unfold. We completely retooled it over about 6 months and opened the version that was the one that I was proud of then. And I was frankly touched that they would call me back and go, okay, we really need you to direct this whole thing. Don't just do the media, do the whole experience.
And was it
we
too
had fun.
scary? Is that why they took it out?
Ultimately, it was too scary for the Magic Kingdom. I think the expectation was you can let your kids run around and it's all rated G. If it had opened in Disney Studios where Tower of Terror is, it would still be playing today.
Yeah.
And
tell us,
people love it.
In 1999, you got to work with Aerosmith, one of my favorite bands. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. Rock and Roller Coaster. So I did one for Florida and one for Paris, and they wanted 2 different sort of conceits for it. So that was pretty crazy. It was very complex, but the conceit was you actually see them through, you go into a recording studio and you look through the room where the musicians play into the engineer's booth, and you see them live. They're listening back to one of their tracks and they see you and invite you to come to their show. So since it was supposed to be them in person and not a movie of them, we shot on big format negative. We shot at 60 frames a second. There could be no cuts because as soon as we started chewing through that much footage per second, if anybody made a mistake on a single take and I called cut and wanted to take 2, they had to throw the whole roll of film out. So it was a lot of tension on the set. They didn't have an endless stack of film, didn't tell me how big the stack was, but my job was to zen it out, get everybody to perform in one continuous shot with no cuts and not run out of film. And so we managed it. And so that was another job in like, we're all scared out of our minds. It's your job to keep everybody from panicking. And so thankfully was able to pull that off. And Stephen and the group were great.
That's awesome.
And you had to literally keep them cool, a cool
Yes.
head, but temperature wise, talk about, you had to manage expectations about that studio.
Yes, since it's supposed to be real, you can't have different focus planes in the footage you're showing. So I had to hold focus from the front of the engineer's desk through the characters all the way to the back, and then the door opens to reveal a scene outside. All has to be in focus on a giant film negative, not video, film, at 60 frames a second. So we had to pour so much light onto the set. It was insanely hot. It was like Death Valley on the worst day. And we had to put like safety contact lenses on a couple of the guys that were closest to the lights. And it was so hot. It was unbearably hot. So I told one of their people dealing with wardrobe before they came, I just said, they're going to kill me if I don't tell them about this. This is insane. Brought in the wardrobe person. They were like, oh, I've been on a movie set before. It's like, no, you don't get it. Turn the lights on. They freaked out. They ran to a phone, called them. So Stephen and the guys came. They had just performed on the Oscars the night before. Don't Want to Miss a Thing from Armageddon. And so they arrived. I was talking to them about that, but Stephen has like changed the subject. Take us to the oven. Take us to the friggin' oven. It's like, I want to see what this thing is. So they all wanted to get in and feel the heat. And they really, it was like, since they were warned about it and they were troopers about it, they just said, we're gonna survive. We're gonna do this thing. We're gonna look like we don't care. And so they toughed it out. And the producers said, sure, and we serve a roller coaster, and so it had a guitar and flames, and so they all got there. They survived hell, and they were real troopers about all of that. I was astounded that they had to be dealing with the other issue of long take with no mistakes, and no pieces put together. But it was on top of that all the like dealing in Death Valley, basically.
So 2013, you guys got a chance to work together on what many people consider the best dark ride on Earth.
Well, wait. I need to back up.
There's no time to back up, Joe.
No, but this is like one of my favorite all-time, favorite all-time theme park shows that really has Jerry's touch, what makes Jerry great, and that's Cinemaji and Disneyland Paris. So Jerry, just give us a couple minutes about Cinemaji, because we'd be remiss not to touch on that.
Absolutely loved working on Cinemaji, and every day was heartfelt from everyone involved with it. Martin Short and Julie Delpy and Cario and Alan Cumming together in this adventure, and it starts in a theater. And you think you're going to see just a Valentine to a century of cinema. There's a real person in the audience physically who disrupts the show with their phone ringing and talking to the airport. The host comes in and tries to get them to turn their phone off or leave. They insist on staying on the phone and play Keep Away to finish the discussion with the airport, stumble on stage, cast a real shadow on the movie screen, and get zapped by Alan Cumming, who's a silent movie wizard in the movie. He looks out of the movie, is annoyed with this guy, hits him with a puff of magic. Physically, the guy disappears in a plume of smoke, thanks to Jim Steinmeier, David Copperfield's illusionist engineer. And every show, the physical event happens, he disappears there, reappears inside the movie. We've had a lookalike out in the audience. Now you see, oh, well, now that I see him close, it's Martin Short. They go through Julie Delpy, and then they punch him out because he was a troublemaker. So immediately they punch his lights out. Julie Delpy is a silent movie actress. She takes pity on him. They sort of have love at first sight. And he's chased out of the movie because they're still angry with him for disrupting our show. She goes on a quest to find him, and it becomes a romance over 25 minutes. They go through 60 iconic movies trying to find each other. So we built sets to replicate everything. There was only, I think, one green screen in the whole thing. So, at the end, the people pass back through the screen, out and back in again, and all kinds of amazing effects. But people would cheer the loudest, not for the amazing visual effects we did, which were pretty amazing, but for the moment when they finally are together and they hug and kiss. And that it was a good lesson that despite all the wonderful illusions we did, what people cared most about was the heart and the two characters being together. Okay.
Okay, Ryan, now let's move forward.
And it played for 15 years and had millions of viewers. So,
Mystic Manor, any thoughts on that?
Oh gosh, Joe, what a wonderful thing. You invited me into it, directed media for that. I remember your first challenge was the big magical storm. Is that it's sufficient enough spectacle to and emotional peak to warrant spending all this money on this attraction? So I did concepts, brought in art and ideas, and we made sure it was Albert, the little monkey who had let it's impish magic out of the music box. It became a scene where he tries desperately to grab the music box and reverse his own mistake and try to put the magic back in that music box. So it became a moment of desperation for him. And from a story standpoint, helped resolve the story in a sort of a character sense. But I wound up doing concepts for not only that main story beat, but for a Fresco. We had this character, Medusa character, a mosaic. So I designed her and every piece. So in case you were to build it physically, it actually would be honest about all the pieces that it would take to do that. And the erupting Mount Vesuvius. And I did mock-up animation for how it might look. And I didn't know that you were going to use my mock-ups as the final. But I remember Tim Landry was the brilliant visual effects guy that I've worked with repeatedly. And he looked at it and went, well, we just love this. Send us your original files. And
Yeah,
So
because we had actually had it, Jerry, we had in the budget,
yeah,
the money to hire a artist, to take your concept pieces
Yeah.
and make them real, but they were the absolute right tone because, we were going for this kind of scary, fun tone.
right.
in
Fun
the
scary, yes.
introduction. And we did have one other artist do a piece and it came back and it looked labored and it looked too scary. And I said, the hallmark of everything that Jerry's does is appeal, and those pieces were just so appealing. So I remember having the conversation with Tim and saying, let's just use Jerry's pieces.
So you were part of that too. Well, I appreciated that. That was so much fun to then visit the actual park and see those things at work. That was so fun. And by the way, the lava engulfing the people at the table and the little clinking of the glasses, I was animating that, and Rebecca came by. Rebecca Rees, my wife, who's also I met at Disney. She came in through Art Center into Disney and was in the feature animation department. She saw my scene and she went, "Oh, it'd be funny if they clink glasses." And I went, "Oh, that's cool." And I put it in. So that little extra piece of charm where it's like, yes, they're all covered with lava, but they clink the glasses at the end of it, was thanks to Rebecca. So, and we always listen to each other when there's that was our tradition coming out of Call Arts. It's like, if something plus is what you're working on, keep your ears open.
Good idea can come from anywhere.
That's
right.
So Jerry, in about 15, it looks like you actually become a Disney employee after about 18 years of consulting. What are you doing here in Glendale?
Yeah, I purposely stayed an independent contractor for so many years. It allowed me to actually, it was good for me and good for the studio because it allowed me to experiment on other things. And frankly, back at the studio, when they had a problem that needed my touch, they would look at me as fresh eyes and not part of anybody's political agenda. So I wouldn't get tripped up in any of that. But they finally actually came out to meet me when I was doing experiments in dome projections for an independent group. We did 80-foot domes with stereoscopic 3D projection all around you and stuff. So the Disney R&D department for Imagineering, the WDI R&D department, approached me and they asked me to become an executive R&D Imagineer. And and I was at the same time being wooed by another company that was doing VR and AR, and they knew I'd had my eye on the future stuff for a long time. And so I had two parties approaching me for the job at the same time. Disney, through John Snoddy, the head of the department, they promised me a bigger sandbox to play in. And it was so nice that they basically said, here's stacks of PhD scientists handpicked from around the world in a secret place that are going to just do experiments with us. Wow. And it's your job to be the guardian of story, character, and emotion to make sure that all that stuff is in the service of that. So it was so fun to be able to go in and deal with people in silos of science that might not have even touched each other before, but now like suggest a collaboration and have people mystified at what it's going to be emotion, and then to explain and to guide them through and have them feel it, and then have them start to engage with, what would really be touching us if we did this? And they would start to be the creators too of the story as well as the technology. So it was after 2 years, John could see that I love experimenting. I always remember back when I tiptoed out of the animation department and went on to Tron, they could see that I kept that exploration spirit alive. So even when they pulled me into that, I was sort of resisting the full-time staff position. So they put up with me for 2 years being a project hire. And they said, well, we'll give you 2 years to be comfortable with it, but then you have to pull the trigger. You either become staff full-time or you leave. Like it's a choice after 2 years. So after 2 years, I said, yes, I've really enjoyed it. And so for 3 more years, then I was full-time staff. So it was a five-year stint. And I got to be creative lead on the Kiwi project, the free walking bipedal robot thing, for 3 years. And working with Scott Lavallee and his team, they were absolutely genius. But it was, it was my job to just go, how does the illusion of life start to appear in these things? Yeah. And also I was project lead for an artificial intelligent companion character, which hasn't been unveiled to the public yet. It may in Galaxy's Edge, but COVID disrupted us a year into it. And I think a core team, I really worked hard to bring in, there was Sarah Wolfick, a brilliant writer who had dealt with artificial intelligence before. So a small team has stayed together, and I really hope they unveil it, because it was meant to be the most illusion of life capable AI character ever created. And I just got to say this one thing about that. It was sort of a moment that symbolized the best of working at R&D. There was a project for a conversational character encounter that would all be AI driven. And we did a demo of it one year. And at the beginning, as people start talking to this character, the impulse of people was to stay away from any sort of tricky subject matter that might turn into dark place or emotional troubles. I told them, well, no, we have to face that head on, because that will happen. And, Rebecca had done a pretend character for school kids. And as soon as she was the pretend character, kids would talk about serious things. I just said, we should learn from that. So they said yes. They allowed me to use family as the discussion point. So, of course, that's wonderful for some people and really dicey for other people and sad for some people. And we had our character ready to deal with the conversation no matter where it would go. So I had a team suddenly aware that, oh my God, we are tackling emotional things. We're dealing with empathy, and how do you deal with that, and therapy issues as well. And we opened it, a test. We brought through for a month people through, and we didn't spy on people when they were alone with the character, but we had a number of people say they had shed a tear in a good way with our character, feeling a sort of kindred spirit moment. And I was careful not to stay in the dark place too long, but make sure they're heard and acknowledged, and then sort of offer something that didn't seem like a trivial piece of positive advice. But anyway, it bore fruit. So it gave them confidence that they started to build characters that really go out into the world to think about empathy, bigotry, and therapy as big issues to be dealt with responsibly in AI.
So would you say,
before we ask the timely and the timeless question, right?
yeah,
I want to apply a quote to Jerry, actually from Marty Sklar. And it's actually a quote about Walt, but I think it fits Jerry Rees so perfectly, and it's also a perfect segue into our timely and timeless question. Marty Sklar always said that Walt had one foot in the past, one foot in the future. The foot in the past, of course, that it's all about great stories and timeless stories and the emotions that connect us all as human beings. But then Walt always had one foot in the future, always looking for the new technology, first to embrace the multi-plane stereographic, sound with Fantasia, audio animatronics. You just think of all the things that Walt used. And just listening to Jerry for the last hour, I mean, I think I can honestly say that quote fits Jerry Rees. One foot in the past, one foot in the future. And I'm excited about what that foot in the future is going to bring, Jerry.
Right.
So with all your experience and wisdom, Joe and I are on this eternal search. What do you think makes a guest experience timely yet timeless?
I think it's the fact that you always stay tapped into an emotional reason to care.
Okay.
And every technology allows you to do that. I'll do a quick story. I was in Dubai. I had pitched a future city where it was physical and virtual build at the same time. There was a woman that heard my pitch and she said, I don't want, so this whole wall behind me could be media? And I said, yes. And she went, I don't want my kids coming home to play a 10-foot video game. So I said, okay, imagine that your kids are still at school for a half hour. You have a little time to yourself. You make a cup of tea. You pull up a chair next to this wall. 100 miles away, your mom is in an apartment that you haven't visited for a month. She pulls up a chair next to her wall with her cup of tea, and the two of you just see each other life size. You talk to each other. You forget there's even a wall there. Yeah. And she suddenly went from, I hate this invasive new technology, it's going to be loud, noisy games, to like, oh my God, she got tears in her eyes. She's got, I would love that. It was all future tech. It was just how you applied it. As soon as it became in the service of her connecting with someone she loved and sharing that moment, she wanted it. She was dying to have that. And I think that's true of artificial intelligence and virtual reality and blended reality, which I really believe in. I think that true metaverse is going to be more blended reality than people know. But I think the key is find reasons that resonate with people's emotions and connect them with people they love. And it will always be timely and timeless.
Thank you, Jerry.
Wow.
Thank you, Jerry. It was
Thank you,
wonderful
Jerry
reporting back
Rees.
to modern
An
day.
amazing
Thanks for
hour
inviting me
together.
on the time
Yeah.
machine. I've always wanted to take a trip with you. This is great.
It was awesome. So Becky,
All right. Well, another fantastic episode, and we hope you enjoyed this ride. I know we all did. Thank you so much to Jerry Rees for time traveling with us today. And on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we want to thank you for spending an hour of your precious time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Join us again next month when another experience industry icon will catch a ride on our time machine. May your tomorrow have the nostalgia of the past, the wonder of the present, and the promise of the future. Thank you guys so much again for joining us. Have a fantastic weekend.
Bye, Chris Kelly and Jeremy Hoffman and everybody.
Get it.